singing, so maybe there have been others, but I tried to Google it, but that was just too esoteric for Google.
And the Oklahoma producer, Eva Price, because Oklahoma won for Best Revival.
And she, let me see if I can find this. Hold on one second. I need my glasses for this.
I don't have the inside information on Eva.
Well, she said, oh, yeah, producer of Oklahoma, Best Musical Revival. Thank you, Jen, for teaching me about love.
I don't want to fight about this too much, but Bryan Cranston won for Network for Best Actor in a Play, and he said, he gets up and says archly, "Finally, a straight old white guy gets a break," you know, and I thought that was kind of funny.
I didn't. You didn't like that? I thought it was not.
I loved what he said, but he dedicated the award to the media, to us. And he said, the media isn't the enemy of the people, demagoguery is the enemy of the people. And he's known to be a conservative, you know.
Exactly.
But what he said was a direct hit on Trump.
But his conservatism is one reason I did not find his statement about finally a straight white guy amusing.
I agree, but he's gotten better. And then Ben Platt, who won the Tony for Dear Evan Hansen a couple of seasons ago, presented an award after 11 p.m. and he gets up and he says, "If you're still watching this, you're gay." I thought that was funny. And then, but it was the lowest rated Tonys ever.
Really?
Because everybody's online doing things, they're not watching TV.
Right. All right. Well, if you want to get out of the house, you can go to the Film Forum next week and see the original Paris is Burning by Jenny Livingston. It is playing from June 14th to 27th for a couple of weeks, and Jenny will be there in person talking about the film on June 15th and 22nd.
And they're re-releasing the film about David Hockney called A Bigger Splash, which filmed him in the early 70s when he was already an established artist. And he's filming that, and he's making that famous painting that you see part of it there that was sold for $90 million last year, the record at the time for a living artist. And it is a fascinating film. It's not narrative. It's not a documentary, although it's real people. I really liked it. And then there's some fantasies. That's Peter Schlesinger, who was ends up being in that painting. And it's very sexy. This kid does a love scene with another guy that just pops up on the screen and will blow you away.
A reminder that next week on the 18th, PBS is airing The Lavender Scare about the government purges of gay people from government jobs in the 50s and 60s. Tremendous film. And I watched Stonewall Uprising again on American Experience. That's available online from PBS.
And I should say that A Bigger Splash about Hockney is opening at the Metrograph June 21st. And then nationwide. I saw a play called Handbag by Moira Buffini at 5090's 59th, Maggie Thatcher and Queen Elizabeth, two of each in the play.
Why?
Because younger and older. Okay. And it's an import from Britain. It's been around for a long time. It really deals with the destruction of government and the shift to the right in the 80s that we're really paying the price for now. So I do recommend that at 5090's 59th.
And I just want to thank the producers of Gentleman Jack, which just wrapped up its first season. There will be a second season. It ended very romantically with a sort of covert wedding between Gentleman Jack and her beloved. Yes. But they did a great job. And,
great show.
Yeah, and I really appreciated that.
You can get it on demand if you missed it.
Thank you for that. And we'll be back with more from the heat of Pride Month next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Trump's address reminded us of the threat that this administration poses to democracy and justice. But the truth is, we've won some key battles together. Last year, we won privacy rights at the Supreme Court case Carpenter versus the United States. Net neutrality gained congressional support, bringing us one step closer to restoring a fair and free internet. We forced Trump to reverse his family separation policy and held the administration accountable for each and every family it tore apart. And even as the president acknowledged, we made huge strides in criminal justice reform with the passage of the First Step Act. Now, thousands of people who've served unjust sentences will face a fairer system. You help make these victories possible. We're gearing up for more critical, long-term battles this year, so we need you with us. Commit to a monthly gift that will sustain Free Speech TV's work in 2019 and beyond. Month by month, your dedication allows us to better plan our programs, keep our bills paid, and hire staff for better journalism. And that, importantly, gives us peace of mind. Despite the pressures of funding, with your monthly contributions, Free Speech TV could be on solid footing. We can't do this work without you. We're asking you out there to please call now and sign up for an automatic donation of $20 for 20 months. If you want independent progressive media to thrive, please call 877-378-8669 or go online to freespeech.org to set up a $20 monthly contribution.
Real G's got hoes, pocket full of seeds as I'm making my rows. See me in the sunrise watching it grow. Irrigation for the water as I'm watching it flow. I'm saving money for sure. This your man DJ Cave on Live in the Rec. Keep it locked in. Free Speech TV, y'all. Peace.
We are in a crisis. We've got to make sure we elect the right leader, and we know it's not the one in the White House today.
We've invited 8 viable, historic candidates to this stage to answer questions sourced by all of you.
We have a simple message for these candidates and for anyone seeking office in these United States. We, women of color voters in this country, are 20 million strong. Our votes matter.
I believe women of color are the saving graces of our democracy. She the People is a national network to elevate the voice and political power of we women of color. Remember, we're a powerful voting bloc. 1 of 5 voters in primaries are women of color, and we are 25% of the voters in key swing states. We're taking the country forward.
I live, the only person in the United States Senate, I live in a black and brown inner city community that economically is below the poverty line. And I watch my neighbors who work full-time jobs catch extra shifts where they can, and when they go to my local bodega, they still have to use food stamps to meet the minimum basic needs of a family. That is unacceptable, that is injustice, and because it disproportionately affects African American, Latinos, and minorities, it is a racial injustice issue as well.
I have a track record of getting things done for vulnerable communities, especially women of color, and that is exactly what I will do if I'm elected President of the United States.
The United States cannot continue to be in a position thinking that we can be the policemen of the world, spending trillions of taxpayer dollars coming out of our pockets, coming out of our communities, to go and launch these wars that we've seen in Iraq and Libya and Syria have caused so much suffering.
We need to have a president of the United States who understands that if we are going to be true to the values of who we say we are, if we are going to be true to the actual history of what created us and who we are, then we will have a commitment from the President of the United States, which is the President of the United States I will be, that will pass comprehensive immigration reform, that will stop allowing the United States government to commit a human rights abuse at the border, which is what this family separation policy has been.
And with this, it was Barbara Jordan from this great state who once said that what Americans want is something quite simple. They want a country as good as its promise. Let's make good on this promise.
Yeah. There have to be consequences for people who rejected asylum seekers who will lawfully trying to present themselves at our international ports of entry with not a penny to their name, fearing for their lives and the lives of their kids, and to be met not with salvation but your worst nightmare, that child torn from your arms by force. Yes, there has to be consequence. Yes, I support a $15 minimum hourly wage in this country for everyone without exception. But I also want to acknowledge that a minimum wage is not going to be enough, especially when it comes to women of color. Women alone in this country are paid 80 cents on average what a man is paid for the same job, but African American women, 61 cents of what a man is paid. Latinas, 53 cents of what a man is paid. We also need an equal rights amendment ratified in this country so that no woman can be discriminated against on any basis whatsoever.
This is no time for petty divisiveness. This is a time to stand together.
We have a real problem in the criminal justice system, and it is a race problem. We need to address that head on. We cannot pretend that we have a race-neutral criminal justice system. We don't. We got a room full of people here who had to fight for what they believe in. Today, a minimum wage job in America will not keep a mama and a baby out of poverty. That is wrong. It is worth fighting for, and it's why we're all going to stay in this.
Senator Elizabeth Warren! She the People will be going to swing states to empower women of color all the way through November 2020. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Bye-bye.
What the She the People Forum means to women of color like me is that our political power, the power that we put into the Democratic base, is finally being taken seriously. People realize that our votes count and our issues matter, and that they're issues of all Americans.
She the People and bringing women into leadership positions is really important to me because it allows for representation. There's only 33 women in the Texas House at the moment and 117 men, and to me that just doesn't represent me. And I'm really excited about being able to see more diversity and more women to be able to represent me and all my friends, and I'm super excited.
She the People is so incredibly important because it's bringing together women of color, their voices, their opinions, their vote, to hear from all of the presidential candidates in a time when this community is more powerful, more influential, more active than ever. Women of color have always been, for the most part, loyal Democrats. They've always been the ones that have pushed us to be better. They've always been the ones to push our own party, our Democratic Party, but to certainly hold Republicans accountable, to ensure that our elected officials, regardless of partisanship, are doing the right thing on behalf of our communities. And so to be here, to have all of our voices amplified, represented, and heard by presidential candidates, and for them to recognize that they have to listen and they have to learn and work on behalf of this community is historic, and it's going to make such an incredible positive difference for our communities and for our country.
Secretary Castro! Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Thank you so much.
Good to see you.
How are you?
Thank you. Hey.
Hello.
I didn't know I had my own music.
Yeah.
My own music.
I was waiting for the walk-on music.
Yeah, they made you wait. Everybody wait to get the right walk-on music. Does everybody have their own walk-on music?
Yeah, we all have
entire homecoming video, but it would have taken
but it's taken too long.
Wait, I will say, though, that the picture that y'all have in your program is actually of my brother, Joaquin. Yeah, you have my brother's picture. Yeah, that's true.
Prove it.
Listen.
He would say that that's a good thing because he's better looking than I am, but, you know. Yeah.
All right. Well, you're home. You're in your home state of Texas.
That's right. Good to be here in Texas.
I'm gonna tell you, or ask you our first question. It's many people, not only here in Texas, but across the country. It's about gentrification.
Yeah.
Gentrification has forced many of us further and further from our jobs, driving long distances, looking for affordable places to live. What would be your plan as president to address this, a social justice issue, environmental issue that affects, above all, young people and working people?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question, and thank you all very much for having me here today. It's great to be here in Texas. To everybody that isn't from Texas, bienvenidos a Texas. So I imagine that a lot of folks in this audience have grappled with this reality, which is that today we see throughout the country in many neighborhoods in the United States, especially in communities of color, and especially in low-income communities of color, a lot of people being displaced. And I can tell you that if I had to grade every single community that I saw when I was HUD Secretary, I was Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, to give them a letter grade, and I visited 100 different communities, I would not give a single community an A for what they're doing when it comes to gentrification. Because usually what happens is that there's a neighborhood that hasn't been paid attention to, it's been underinvested in, the people have been largely ignored, and then it starts getting some improvements, and new people start moving in and fixing up some of the houses or the apartments, and then they start getting some restaurants or grocery store or bars, and then all of a sudden there's this cycle that happens, and by the time there's a response, it's past a tipping point, and people are getting displaced. Austin is a great example here in Texas. In Austin, on the east side of Austin, over the last 15 years, they have lost about 50% of their African-American population, right? So that's just one example. The question is, what would I do about that? I think we have to tackle this in many different ways that connects the dots. First of all, we need to make sure that there's a greater supply of affordable housing so that people can afford to live in their own neighborhood that they choose to live in. Secondly, we have to find ways to provide relief for the people that are there, the residents who are living there, so that they are not as impacted, for instance, as property taxes go up, as the cost of living in those neighborhoods go up. There have been a couple proposals, for instance, here in the Texas legislature on how you might provide property tax relief to help buffer low-income residents and prevent displacement. At the national level, I would encourage and invest in communities so that people could find affordable housing supply where they want to live, stay in these neighborhoods, and then be buffered against that kind of displacement. The other thing that we need to do, though, is enforce our Fair Housing Act. And when I was Secretary of HUD, we promulgated, or we passed the most groundbreaking rule called Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing, which was unfair business from the 1968 Fair Housing Act, and basically said to communities that got federal taxpayer money through HUD, you have to get more serious about equal housing opportunity in your jurisdiction. So, we promulgated that rule. The first plans from cities started to come in October, I think it was October 4th of 2016. And then when Dr. Carson and the Trump administration got in, they actually put that on ice. If I'm president, one of the first things that I'm doing is making sure that we bring back affirmatively furthering fair housing so that every community has to answer for equal housing opportunity. And I believe that that's going to help to address this issue of gentrification.
And Secretary Castro, if I could ask a quick follow-up. You came, obviously you were HUD Secretary under President Obama, who came in just at the height of the Great Recession, and came in, and that was his first task, was trying to reverse that damage. And a lot of that damage was to families of color, whose housing disappeared in the mortgage crisis. You saw predatory lenders attempted to be reined in by bills like Dodd-Frank. A lot of that has been rolled back under this administration. Do you think that some Wall Street bankers should have gone to prison over their conduct to help bring on the Great Recession? And B, what would you do to reinstate some of the protections against predatory lending that so impact communities of color?
Yeah, thank you for that question. You know, what happened now about a decade, a little bit more than a decade ago, decimated black wealth especially, also wealth in the Latino-Latina community. And I do think that there were successes in the Obama administration. I do think that there are big, powerful forces that were taken on, but I agree with you, I agree with the spirit of the question, that I believe there should be accountability for people on Wall Street for what happened.